now where people are calling the 3 agreements that were reached last year in 2015 as breakthrough landmark agreements with regard to most of the issues that are on the global agenda. Related to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, related to the Paris Agreement on climate change, and related to the financing for development. How do we finance these? And there tends to be a little bit of an approach which says, okay, we have the agreements, now the challenge is implementation. But I think we've got to be very careful. There are a couple of key issues before we just think it's about implementation. First of all, we are looking at how do we measure progress and how do we finance it. And there is a real danger that we're actually going to write down and lose a lot of the ambition that we achieved last year by the way we measure progress and by the way we do or don't finance it. This relates to issues to do with indicators. It relates to issues to do with it not being only GDP that measures progress. It relates to very, very important issues of how this is not only public financing, but also the role of the business sector in terms of all of these. In terms of where we have a lot of fragmentation, we have a lot of different policy directions that actually aren't coherent. They pull in different directions. We have a commitment on the one hand to look at emissions of climate change. We have a commitment to deal with issues to do with health. At the same time that many governments are signing bilateral investment agreements that are actually making the ability to achieve the health goal, for example, more or less impossible. So this means that the universal framework, we need to come to some understanding of what is the framework. Will it be the 2030 Agenda or not? The signals that are being given to business to be an important part of the process, the real understanding that to achieve this agenda we have to go from billions to trillions, and the role of the private sector requires a whole new approach on the rules and tools of the engagement from the business sector that we do not have in place at the moment. Not rules and tools that constrain, but rules and tools that mean that that universal framework and the moving away from the fragmentation can actually take place. So there are different parts of the process. Most important is at the national level in terms of how to do that. Equally important is what needs to be done at the global level, because there are some issues that can only be tackled globally. They cannot be solved at the national level. You cannot deal with an arrangement with regard to the business sector if it isn't global. For example, with regard to whether or not they're going to pay tax. You cannot start looking at incentives to do with low carbon if they're not consistent. And so there are some very interesting conversations that are taking place right now. Central banks in places where maybe people wouldn't think of how to move to this particular stage. How do we hold these various places accountable? Again, a very difficult question. Accountable to what? Until we have an agreement that we have this universal framework, until the member states are prepared to work together and say that we are going to use as an overall universal framework the importance of achieving sustainability, the importance of tackling inequalities, the importance of saving the planet, and then providing incentives within that, we will continue to be doing what we do now, where we have so many divergent paths that we don't stand a chance of scaling up.